Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brian Yacono. We are coming on the air now because Governor Janet Mills is about to give us her thoughts on the report released 2 weeks ago from the Independent Commission on the Lewiston mass shootings. 18 people were killed, 13 others wounded at those two locations in the city, Just in Time Recreation and Schmenge's Bar and Grill, back on the night of October 25th. Here's a reminder of some of the Commission's findings. The Lewiston Commission said that the Sagadahoc Sheriff's Department failed to use Maine's yellow flag law to place Card in custody and remove his weapons in the months before the shootings. That senior officers in Card's U.S. Army Reserve chain of command failed to take steps to reduce the threat he posed to the public, as his mental state was clearly spiraling. And that while police ultimately did find Card's body a full 2 days later, the Commission acknowledges the, quote, utter chaos among the hundreds of law enforcement officers in and around Lewiston in the first hours after the attacks. Now, just this morning, Maine State Police released its findings of an internal after-action report it conducted. And while the report said police agencies did a lot of things right in the hours and the days after the shooting, there were also some deficiencies that need to be addressed, they say. Among them, incorporate more active shooter training for all sworn state police personnel. Develop and train investigative crime scene protocols, especially for mass casualty events. Give advanced training to all sworn state police personnel on how to work under an incident command system, like the one set up in Lewiston the night of the shooting. And when that command system is established, make sure law enforcement from other agencies do not self-deploy to the area without first going through the command center. It should be noted that while it didn't offer any recommendations, the Lewiston Commission did say it hoped state police would perform an after-action review like the one that the report just came out for this morning. Of course, we have all the details of both the final report from the Commission and also the details of the report from state police that came out just a short time ago, just around 11 o'clock this morning. We have all that for you on newscentermaine.com. I also want to point out that Sergeant Aaron Schofield in Sagadahoc County has disputed some of the results in the findings, saying there were some key facts missing from that report that came out and the investigation that was done, both by the final commission and the Army Reserve, which did its own investigation. So there have been a number of reports that have come out over the last few months specifically. Those are what we keep looking at. And today is the first time we'll be hearing from Governor Mills on that final report that came out, again, just about 2 weeks ago now. I believe it was August 20th that report came out. So what you're looking at here is live pictures from where the governor will be speaking in just a few minutes. We were told she will be approaching the podium shortly to address that final report. And again, we want to reiterate the message in that final report from the Lewiston Commission was not specific recommendations, and they made it very clear when they released the report, and we carried that for you as well, that their initiative, their goal, was to simply point out the facts of what happened and present that to the state in hopes that then these further conversations would happen, certainly with the governor's office and then also with state police, the lead agency there, for most of that investigation and the report that just came out from them. So we expect to hear from the governor shortly. We'll take that picture for you right now as we anticipate her approaching the podium any moment. You obviously are watching this on News Center Maine on broadcast on television, live pictures right here in Augusta, but also streaming on our website and our mobile app. We will carry the entire address from the governor for you and then come right back here and debrief and get back to your final programming. So again, what we're expecting to hear is the governor addressing that final report. It just came out about 2 weeks ago. We have not heard directly from the governor on those comments, the observations from the investigators, and that was a large panel of people from a range of backgrounds that did their look into what happened in those 24 hours, the 48 hours around the shooting itself, and then also in the days that followed. Who you see here on the screen right now is the interpreter for the hard of hearing and the deaf community. Certainly, as we've reported since the night of the shootings, the deaf and hard of hearing community was specifically impacted from that shooting, with a number of people participating in a bowling league that night. Many of them were victims. Governor Janet Mills just now taking the podium. We'll hear her address to that final report that just came out.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. And to all members of the media who are present, please make sure that our ASL interpreter is visible in your shots for the duration of this press conference. I want to begin my remarks by thanking the members of the Independent Commission for their dedicated, deliberate, thorough, and transparent work over these past many months. In the aftermath of the horrific attack on our friends, family, and fellow citizens, when darkness descended on the city of Lewiston, on our state, and when the depth of our grief seemed infinite, Attorney General Fry and I entrusted the members of the Independent Commission with a solemn duty to put to use their extensive legal, investigative, and mental health experience and expertise, their impartiality and their integrity, and their unflagging determination to establish to the greatest extent possible the unvarnished facts of what happened on October 25th, 2023, and the circumstances that led up to and followed that tragic event. On behalf of the nearly 1.4 million people of the great state of Maine, I thank the 7 members of the Independent Commission, as well as its staff, for maintaining the objective pursuit of truth as your guiding star. I also thank them for treating the many people who came before the Commission under difficult circumstances, most notably the family of the victims, treating them with compassion and respect that they deserved. And I thank those who spoke before the Commission, especially the survivors and family members of victims, who summoned remarkable strength and amid unspeakable grief to share crucial information. Thank you as well. The Independent Commission, after spending hundreds of hours of their time without compensation to listen to voluntary and compelled testimony, to review thousands of documents and meticulously uncover and assemble the available facts, they have fulfilled the duty we entrusted to them. Over these past several weeks, I've closely reviewed the findings of the Independent Commission, their final report, using the days since its release to carefully read and reread the conclusions contained in its 215 pages. In reading the report, I brought to bear my nearly 50 years of experience as well, including that as a private attorney for 16 years, as a former assistant attorney general who prosecuted major crimes, as the district attorney for Franklin, Oxford, and Androscoggin counties, including, of course, the city of Lewiston, as the attorney general of the state of Maine, and now as governor. So I stand before you today to say that I have full faith and confidence in the facts as determined by the Commission, and I agree with the conclusions that the Commission has reached. This report, though, was disturbing and painful to read. In the months preceding the shooting, the family of the perpetrator repeatedly raised concerns about his declining mental health to multiple authorities. Despite those warnings, those authorities, chiefly the Saginaw County Sheriff's Office and the U.S. Army Reserve, missed many opportunities to intervene, to reduce the risk that the perpetrator posed to the people of Maine, and very possibly to have changed the course of events. On a number of occasions, the Saginaw Sheriff's Office and members of the U.S. Army Reserves disregarded the facts, failed to follow established procedures, and demonstrated a callous neglect that contributed to the tragedy of October 25th. I do not say this lightly, because I know every day in communities across Maine, dedicated law enforcement officers patrol our roads, safeguard our cities and towns and our natural resources, always ready for that one urgent call to protect life and security of our citizens and to uphold the law. But in this case, we have to acknowledge that the Saginaw County Sheriff's Office Sergeant Schofield in particular could have and should have done more. I have read the independent review that the Saginaw County Sheriff's Office paid for last November. That review concluded that the responding officers followed the law and their training with the information that was available at the time, and that they acted reasonably. But in light of the Independent Commission's authoritative report, I do not find that analysis persuasive. As the Independent Commission's report makes clear, the Saginaw County Sheriff's Office was well aware of the declining mental health of the perpetrator and was warned that he could pose a danger to himself or others. The office could have, but did not seek an involuntary commitment order. They could have, but did not invoke Maine's extreme risk protection order law, despite having probable cause that the perpetrator was mentally ill, that he posed a likelihood of serious harm, and that he possessed, controlled, or may have acquired a dangerous weapon. They could have, but did not, consult their own new mental health liaison to help secure the perpetrator's cooperation. Instead, that deputy attempted to pass off the responsibility for securing that man's weapons to his family. He canceled the File 6 warning about this armed and dangerous perpetrator, and he closed the case. We have to acknowledge as well that the U.S. Army Reserve, Captain Reamer in particular, should have but did not follow through on a plan to talk to the perpetrator. The Army Reserve should have but did not return multiple phone calls from the perpetrator's sister, who was trying to convey her deep concerns and seek help. They should have but did not follow up on the recommendations of the psychiatric nurse practitioner after the perpetrator's mental health commitment, despite leading the practitioner to believe that they would do so. They should have, but did not share all the important information that they had about the perpetrator with the Saginaw County Sheriff's Office, which might have better informed the Sheriff's Office decision-making. They should have, but did not take other steps as outlined in the Army Reserve procedures that could have removed this perpetrator's weapons. Instead, at multiple critical junctures, members of the U.S. Army Reserve ignored, downplayed, and failed to share information with other law enforcement or take action that could have changed the course of events. At its core, this tragedy was caused by a colossal failure of human judgment by several people on several occasions, a profound negligence that, as the Commission rightly stated, was an abdication of responsibility. As I've said in the past, understanding the facts and circumstances of this tragedy is a cornerstone of healing. Another cornerstone is accountability. Well, this fall, the people of Saginaw County will have before them an opportunity to judge both Sergeant Schofield and Sheriff Merry, and I urge the people of Saginaw County to read this report and to consider it deeply as they decide who should be the next sheriff of Saginaw County. This independent commission report should inform that very important decision. When it comes to the Army Reserve, in July, they issued a report, along with an independent review of that report, noting their failures and the disciplinary actions they've taken against 3 individuals in the chain of command who were responsible for those failures. That report also makes recommendations to improve the oversight and care of Army Reserve soldiers in the future. So this morning, I sent a letter to the United States Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, asking for an update on the status of those recommendations and urging him to ensure that they are fully implemented in as timely a way as possible. And today, I'm also announcing my support for forthcoming federal legislation being drafted by U.S. Senator Collins and U.S. Senator King to direct the military to fully utilize state crisis intervention programs like Maine's to help prevent future tragedies. At the state level, in the many months since this tragedy, I have sat with myself and my own conscience, reflecting upon what is right for Maine in the wake of Lewiston and the tragedies of suicide and domestic violence that are all too prevalent in our society. I've tried to take a broad view of violence in Maine, and I've asked myself, what wise and prudent actions can we take to restore the personal and community sense of safety that was shattered by the tragedy of October 25th, and to anticipate and potentially prevent other acts of violence? Throughout my time in office, I've tried to bring people together, law enforcement, lawmakers, public health, and many others, to achieve enduring reforms that strengthen public safety, that protect our constitutional rights, and that honor Maine's long-standing outdoor traditions. After the tragedy, I spoke with people and organizations all across Maine. I listened to ideas and concerns, and I tried to develop a balanced approach to this difficult issue of violence. What I heard from people across the state is that they recognize the problem of gun violence. They see it in acts of domestic violence, of suicide, and mass shootings nationwide. Each person had ideas about what we could do to address the problem, and each of these ideas was different. But what was not different, what was largely agreed upon, was an overarching belief that violence prevention is important, that we must strengthen our mental health system, and that dangerous people should not have access to firearms. So we strengthened Maine's Extreme Risk Protection Order law, and we introduced legislation that enhanced the public safety and that strengthened Maine's mental health system. We strengthened our extreme risk protection law to clarify that law enforcement can seek a warrant signed by a judge in unusual circumstances to take a person into protective custody. And that provision in law has already been put to use. We further strengthened our existing law to provide for reciprocity for those who are under risk protection orders in other states, providing law enforcement with yet another tool to remove the weapons of someone deemed dangerous. Now, I recognize that there are some who argue that the law is cumbersome. For example, some have questioned the necessity of taking an individual into protective custody or of conducting a mental health assessment to determine risk. Some people suggest that these are unnecessary hurdles that only make the removal of weapons more difficult. But I believe that these steps strengthen our law because they protect the due process rights of all of us. They make the law more constitutionally sound and less subject to being struck down if someone were to challenge it. And these assessments, these mental health assessments, serve as a vehicle to identify behavioral health needs and refer that person to mental health services. It's clear that following last year's tragedy, more and more law enforcement officers across the state are taking our extreme risk protection law seriously. They've taken state-provided training on its use, and they're using it now on a daily basis to remove firearms from those who should not have them. There's no better testament to that than the fact that it has been used 330 times in the past 318 days since October 25th. 330 times. In other words, the law has been used more than once a day on average since the shooting in Lewiston, in courts all over the state, about 15 times more than had been used in the preceding 3 years that it had been in effect. Maine's extreme risk protection order law works. In addition to strengthening the extreme risk protection order law, we also extended the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or NICS, to advertised private sales of firearms. And we provided incentives for background checks in those cases and situations where people are selling to someone they don't know, private sales. And we're establishing an Office of Violence Prevention at the Maine Center for Disease Control and Prevention to coordinate and promote efforts to reduce violence. We're creating more crisis receiving centers, including in Lewiston, that build on the success of the one we created in Portland, allowing any person experiencing a mental health crisis or substance abuse crisis to get immediate, appropriate, and no-cost care. We're strengthening mobile crisis teams that will be dispatched to a person in crisis through 988, Maine's 24/7 hotline, crisis lifeline. All those things we've done in recent months. You know, I recognize that on the one hand, these actions are too little to those who believe that more is needed. And on the other hand, they're too much to those who believe that the opposite, that more is needed and less is needed. But violence is not a simple problem, nor is the remedy a single, simple measure. And these actions represent progress. They do not trample on anybody's rights. They are practical, common sense measures that are not extreme or unusual. They are not a cookie-cutter version of some other state's laws. They are Maine-made, and they are true to our culture and our long-standing traditions while meeting today's needs. I also want to take a moment today to acknowledge all of the first responders and emergency personnel who played a role in responding to this tragedy. Whether you were a dispatcher, a police officer, fire or EMS personnel, hospital staff, victim advocate, ASL interpreter, or other personnel, I'm very deeply grateful for your efforts. That night, all of you were confronted with an emergency like the likes of which you've never faced before, with 2 active shooting sites and dozens of people killed and injured, numerous reports of other active shooting sites, and a simultaneous statewide manhunt, following up on thousands of leads and tips. All of you, along with the Maine State Police, met this challenge with courage and compassion, providing emergency medical support to survivors, gathering and preserving evidence for possible prosecution, locating the body of the perpetrator, protecting and informing the public, and coordinating hundreds of officers, more than a dozen tactical teams, and several federal agencies all at the same time. So on behalf of all Maine people, I thank our state police officers, especially Commissioner Sawchuk, Colonel Ross, as well as Chief St. Pierre of Lewiston and Chief McGee of Lisbon, and all of the first responders who came out that night. They answered the call of duty. While we wish that the perpetrator had been located sooner, I think the Commission is correct to recognize that the collective work of law enforcement personnel prevented further loss of life, both among police personnel and the people of Maine, the general public. In addition to the leadership of the Maine State Police coordinating all of these officers, I want to commend the Maine State Police transparency throughout the commission process. They made thousands of pages of documents available to the commission and to the public. They fully cooperated with the commission. And throughout the process, the state police have been forthright in their acknowledgement that if there are opportunities for improvement, they want to pursue them. To that end, the Commission report encouraged a full after-action review of the Department of Public Safety's response with an independent review. This morning, the Department of Public Safety released that after-action report and announced that the report will undergo an independent review by outside experts with law enforcement experience. I applaud that move. The after-action review report also outlined a series of primary recommendations to improve communication and coordination during any future police responses. Those recommendations include providing additional training to Maine State Police officers and personnel on active shooter, crime scene, and incident command system protocols. The incident command system that was used during the Lewiston tragedy and other emergencies establishes a clear chain of command that should be followed to coordinate the deployment of federal, state, county, and local responders during a crisis and avoid confusion. They also recommended working with federal partners to develop protocols for handling significant incidents and/or mass casualty incidents, and to train local hospitals on following those protocols. They recommend reviewing and updating policies to ensure that any response to events involving deaf and hard of hearing individuals or people who have English as a second language or persons with disabilities include accessible information sharing and support. And finally, they also recommend training supervisors on providing psychological support to their employees following incidents of this sort, which can leave so many seen and unseen scars. I agree with and I support these primary recommendations, and I want to see them implemented. To that end, over the coming months, the Maine State Police will sit down with my budget office to determine what financial resources are necessary to implement these primary recommendations. Following these conversations, I will ask the legislature, as part of my biannual budget request in January, to approve funding that will allow the Maine State Police to fully implement these recommendations. While we fervently hope that law enforcement officers never again have to answer an urgent call like that of October 25th, we want to make sure if that call comes again, they are ready and that they have learned from the challenges they experienced that terrible night and the hours and days that followed. Lastly, as I've said before, a cornerstone of our ability to heal as a people and as a state is knowing the truth about what happened on October 25th and the circumstances that surrounded that tragic day. The Independent Commission has delivered those facts, and with this report, we take another step forward on that long road to healing. I think it's important to acknowledge we're all at different points, different stages of healing. Our state, the people of Lewiston, the families, everyone impacted. Some may still feel frustrated and angry. Some may feel scared. Some may feel grief and sadness or frozen in time, watching the world move on while they live on and missing the people they loved. A feeling that this last year passed both in the blink of an eye and a lifetime. I know I feel all those things at times myself, and I want people to know that those feelings are okay. I have found that the best antidote, if you will, to the anger, grief, and fear is love. It is love, compassion, understanding, and support. It is community, and that is the state of Maine. We have lost 18 people, family, friends, neighbors, loved ones. Many more were injured, both physically and emotionally. In a small, close-knit community like Lewiston, and in a small, close-knit state like Maine, most everyone knew somebody who was directly impacted by this tragedy. But what is special about Maine, and what I've always loved about our state, is that in the darkest of times, in the depths of our most difficult challenges, we're there for one another. Whatever you're feeling, however long you feel it, know that you're not alone. So let us all do our part to protect each other, to listen when someone asks for help, and to speak up when something doesn't feel right, to offer our grace to those who are still grieving, and our love to the people of Lewiston. We will always remember and pay tribute to the victims, the survivors, and their loved ones, and we'll always remember how we came together as one people and as one state to support one another. Thank you. Happy to take a few questions.
Governor, I'm wondering if you could just address the commission's...
Hold on one second.
I'm sorry. I wonder if you could just address the commission's report and what seems to be perhaps a deliberate move on its part not to address any of the systems, an analysis of the herbal law that we have here in the state. And given the people that are on that commission, prosecutors, judges, mental health experts, is there a missed opportunity to assess those systems by having that commission disband without any sort of analysis of that?
Thank you for that. Look, the commission, 7 of them with a total something over 220 years in the aggregate of experience in the criminal justice system, psychiatry, psychology, forensics, courtroom procedures. They brought to bear that experience and background in a determination of the facts surrounding October 25th. They were not asked, and they did not offer policy recommendations or deep analysis of systems, as you call it. They made observations about how certain things failed, I think, and that's an important thing. They were not asked to make policy recommendations because they did not want to, nor did I want them to get involved in the politics of policy making across the board. I guess that's the simple answer. We know from their report our extreme risk protection order law was in effect and could have been used. They were quite clear that Deputy Schofield, for instance, had probable cause to believe that this individual had a mental health issue and was dangerous and had access to firearms.
Governor,
Yes.
you mentioned that you want the people in Saginaw County, the voters there, to review the report carefully and make a decision this November based on that. what are voters supposed to do if both of the candidates were involved in events leading up to the tragedy?
I'm not a voter of Saginaw County, but I think that the facts contained in this report could lead to judgments about the actions or inactions of certain deputies, including Deputy Schofield, for instance.
And the sheriff, Sheriff Marion?
The sheriff isn't mentioned in the report, it's his department. They have to make a decision about who the chief law enforcement officer of that county should be.
Governor West.
Yes, I'm sorry, you had your hand.
Yes, sorry. Is the commission's work completely finished, or will they be involved in any other work moving forward?
The commission has finished its mission, its mandate, according to the executive order. They spent 9 months, something like 16 public hearings, and you know, digesting thousands of pages of documents, talking to.
You've been watching live coverage of Governor Janet Mills reacting for the first time publicly to that final report from the commission investigating the Lewiston shooting. That report came out about 2 weeks ago. A few highlights that she just spoke about in about the 30 minutes that she's been talking. She says they are unvarnished facts, but she has full faith and confidence and agrees with the conclusion of that report. She calls the report disturbing and painful to read. She says a number of members of law enforcement disregarded facts and had callous neglect in their actions involving the shooter, Robert Card, in the months leading up to the shooting. And specifically with the Army Reserve, she said there were a number of points where they should have but did not do things, again, in leading up to the shooting. She also pointed out 11 points specifically that her office has implemented now or is working on implementing in things to strengthen our state around law enforcement and mental health resources and access. From things she has learned from the shooting in the last 11 months now. We, of course, will have much more on both the governor's remarks that are just now wrapping up and this morning's release of the state police after-action report on the Lewiston shooting. That's coming up this afternoon, both online and in our newscasts that start right here at 4 o'clock. I'm Brian Yukono for News Center Maine. We'll return you to your regular programming.